evening and welcome back to the PrinceCast. I'm Michael Medeiros, here for the Prince, and joining me is Sophia LeMaire, one of our columnists. Today we'll be talking about Sophia's column and also some of the other columns this week that have been about No Phat Talk Week, a program which the Eating Concerns Advisors, of whom Sophia is one, have put on last week, and which you guys had also put on in past years. So why don't you tell our viewers what the difference was between past year's events and this year's events?
Well, the only thing that we did differently was this year we sent out emails to the listservs that we all had access to. Otherwise, it was the same event, but this time, when so many people knew about it, we got a lot more responses.
So there have been, I guess, there was a column in the Prince, also very vocal outbreak in anonymous sites like Princeton FML and the Prince website against the week. So what were some of their points? What was your perspective on their points?
Some of the things that people complained about were, one was people talked about there being a problem with obesity and how we shouldn't be encouraging people not to worry about what they eat. But we weren't saying anything about what people should weigh or whether or not they should exercise. We were talking about the fact that people put this shame on being above some weight, which a lot of times isn't defined by health, it's aesthetic, and that's not helpful or appropriate. That's all we were trying to say. Another thing that people said was that we were trying to censor them by telling them they couldn't say certain things. But although the week was called No Phat Talk, the name it goes a little beyond just don't talk about fat, and I feel like people here can understand that, so I feel like that argument might have just been kind of proxy complaint.
Right.
But I guess the idea wasn't that people aren't allowed to have opinions, but that people should think twice about saying something just to be hurtful and not to be constructive.
Okay. So what would you say about the argument that some people have made that it's okay to not encourage people one way or the other about their weight, but the way that your body appears does have an impact on, say your job search or your internship search? Do you think that argument holds any weight?
I mean, I do think that how you look affects how people perceive you, but I don't think that it's fair. I mean, I think you can acknowledge that those things exist in our society, but part of this campaign is to think about people other than what they look like, to get rid of some of those things, I guess.
Okay. Do you think that sort of bias exists in selectivity for campus positions? I think the most obvious example would be Baker.
I mean, it's a little bit difficult to tell on this campus because I feel like being young and stuff, we're not representative that much of the overall makeup of body types.
Right.
So, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of it here, strong bias towards people who look a certain way, but it probably helps or hurts sometimes. Okay,
and the other thing was, what was the statistic that you guys had about the number of people at Princeton who are unsure about their body should be perceived? I saw this in some of the articles. I think it was, was it 54%?
Oh, it was 54% of women would rather be hit by a truck than be fat.
Okay.
And this was a statistic that we got from the group that started No Phat Talk, which is the Tri Delta sorority, and they used it in their original version of the campaign.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty sad statistic. So what sort of work do you and the other ECAs do to sort of combat the overall trends here?
I mean, I guess we do things like this, try to encourage people to think about people in ways that don't have to do with what they look like, because sometimes you get stuck in that as the only thing you know how to talk about, and it's good to acknowledge that and see what else there is to somebody than what they look like.
Right. Okay, and I guess the final thing, which you also addressed in your column, was the fact that No Phat Talk Week, in fact, encouraged many more mentions of the word fat and body image than would have otherwise happened. So, why don't you, restate your response to that?
I mean, I think that was a good thing, because it got people thinking about these things and talking about it, And I feel like it's something that, like, people think that, you know, if you're not diagnosed with an eating disorder, then, like, you're kind of fine. But there are a lot of people who seem to be existing kind of normally, who, like, think about these things all the time. And I feel like getting it out in the open to talk about is really helpful.
Great. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you and the other ECAs for putting on this great event, which has certainly started a dialogue on campus. And thank you for watching our last PrinceCast of 2010.